Hey everyone, Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5 Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
Yo, what's happening, Rush Nation? It's Tuesday. It is a little later than planned. Normally we get to you in the early afternoon because we've recorded on Monday, but we felt this week we should come to you probably on a Tuesday. It would only be right that we got back to the real ways, although next week's probably going to be Monday. But hey, it's me and the big man. How you doing, fella?
Yes, mate. It's good. It's weird doing this on a Tuesday. I think we both had some bits on yesterday. There's been a bit of upheaval in my life for the last 10, 14 days or so. It's all good. It's all pretty much resolved now. But yeah, it did cause some I won't say issues, but time and stress issues. So apologies to everyone listening to this who didn't get the matchup show last week. But you know, it's good to be back in your ears, and business is going to resume as normal from now on.
100%. I mean, you said we had stuff to do. Mine was pretty unexciting. I had to go and collect our click and collect shopping for the week, but it was good. I only had to go to the local depot and not one absolutely miles away, which was a bonus. But yeah, otherwise standard procedure, like you say. It's good that you've got what resolved what you needed to, because I know that was churning away in the background. So
yeah, I mean, we met the day before we went into lockdown, and I sort of vented a bit about what was going on. It's, you know, it wasn't a pleasant experience, but it's done. That's the other side. I come out ahead, so that's the good thing. But yeah, it did great some time, and it did make it very, very difficult for a few days there. So that's why there was no matchup pod, and apologies for that one. No start sits last week, but did get plenty in. So I hope I answered some questions and helped you all get some wins. There was a good record out there for people, despite the fact there was a lot of buys last week. We had a good week in our listener leagues. I think we almost swept. I think we lost 3 out of 17 this week, so we won 14 out of 17 listener leagues this week. So that's a pretty good week. I wasn't quite as good across the board anywhere else, but I pushed this week, went 35 and 35, so I can't really moan anytime you're not losing.
100%. I think I was over 500 when I checked Sleeper this week. A lot of my bars were on the right side, and there was a few trophies knocking about this morning, which was always good, because I think my bye week hell is next week, so I'm not expecting next week to be any good, but I took advantage of people's bye weeks this week. So what's new at 5 Yard, Murf? Anything new and exciting to report?
We revamped well, first of all, I'd like to thank the person or people who decided to set up a troll account, 6 Yard Rush on Twitter. That was interesting. I mean, I didn't really mind. I thought it was funny. I more importantly applaud the person who did 7 Yard Rush and created a troll account of the troll account. That was quite genius. So whoever that was, you know, kudos. But yeah, it was. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting when you get people sort of knocking you for putting out content, and it's like, okay, I mean, cheers. I don't know why people feel the need to do those sorts of things. I personally, as I said, I've had a really tough week. Didn't really enter my mind as to how it didn't even really register a flick, other than the fact I thought it was a bit funny. But yeah, I mean, that was new. So, but you know, there was something one of our patrons raised, and it was right that we made some changes to that this week. So going forward, if you want to see our full ranks, they are going to be on Patreon.com. There's links in the show notes here. There's links in the on the website as well. So our full ranks will be there. We will display our top 12 from each position. But all the up-to-date ranks, including all the ranks I do upwards and including of Sunday that I submit to Fantasy Pros, will be on Patreon. So I'll push a couple of updates there this week. What else? Also, if you join the Patreon, we are kindly going to offer to co-own one of your teams. Now, when we say co-own, we're not going to set lineups for you, and we're not going to do waivers for you. But we will be on hand effectively to see the state of play, to offer recommendations. we'll look at the waiver lists, and we'll say, you should maybe pick up this person, and we'll be effectively like a helping hand, because what you don't really want is somebody to just say, oh, well, you just bought a ringer in mid-season to kind of help you. And we don't even necessarily have to be a co-owner on Sleeper if that's, if you want us to be and we get full visibility, great. But ultimately, you'll just get the opportunity to chat us via Slack. We'll either set up a private Slack channel for your team, or we'll find a way to communicate that works best with you, and we will share inputs, and we'll look at the state of play and offer suggestions, and really just sort of be, I don't want to say a coach, more like just a sounding board. And we'll offer some opinions, and it's up to you to decide if you want to do that. We're not going to run your team, but we are going to be sort of personal assistant. We'll be like your assistant coach. We'll be like your offensive coordinator. That's a good way of putting it. So we'll be like your offensive coordinator. We'll offer some plays up, and you as the head coach can make that decision. So that's another service we're providing on Patreon. And then also we're going to have all our patrons on the podcast very soon. And we're also going to do a Zoom call. So now's a really good time to join. You can join for the price of a cup of coffee a month. There's also, if you stay with us for a certain amount of time, depending on what tier, you get a t-shirt or a hoodie. There's lots of cool stuff that you get on top of everything, and you get to be part of a cool community. Our patrons this year are playing for an NFL jersey as well against the staff. So there's a lot of stuff going on there, and that will continue to grow even more, especially as we get more patrons supporting. So none of this is free. Things like the book and everything have come a long way to ensure that Stocks and I are not putting our life savings into this. So that's good. But yeah, it is definitely just anything that you can contribute is just incredibly important to just keep us going. We plan to do the book next year. We plan to do a few other things. We also plan to bring a more charitable element next year. So there's a lot of things going on. It's an exciting time to join. So please join the Patreon. Like I said, it's a few quid a month, depending on the tier. And also you'll join our private Slack channel. Most of them on there even have my mobile number, and they can just WhatsApp me, and I'll happily give it out to any of our patrons so that they can. But yeah, Joel wrote one troll tweet, and then they got reported by, I think it was like 50 people reported them and booted them off Twitter. So that was quite funny.
I was quite a fan of their pirate badge that they'd inserted over our emblem, though, which was pretty good. I thought that was that would adorn a flagship in the Peppa Pig series or something like that. So yeah, it was a good one. It was a good one. But also, Murf, you not forgot, but I thought I'd bring it up. If you only listen to the flagship show, you're doing it wrong. I mean, we've got 5 Yard College over there. Boys are doing a tremendous job. Pitsy and Rob now on a Friday with a Fast Action Friday hit. And don't know whether you heard it, Rush Nation, but Nick and Mark have now got their own DFS pod. It's just dropping on our channel. It doesn't have its own channel as of yet. That monster hasn't been born, but who knows? Let's see how that one goes. But last week they did pretty well. I think they cashed as well, which is always good news.
Yeah.
And they were funny. They were talking about having a real short, snappy one, and then they did their first one, and both got talking, and it turned into an hour long. So that was. I did say that to them. I said, "Boys, podcasting gets that way, and it will happen." And like, yeah, but I think they are going to try and keep it short, snappy, and fun. And going forward, hopefully, they can keep cashing out, because good stuff.
And listen, hey, that's a really good way to pay for your Patreon membership every month, is if you do DFS and listen to those guys, and you've only got cash once to pay for it. So if we're giving you the advice, or sorry, Nick and Mark are giving you the advice to therefore pay for your Patreon subscription, because you've only got the cash once a month.
It's like a 5 yard full circle.
Yeah, it's a full circle that keeps going on and on, but it's good fun, and they did a great job, and there's room for more. We haven't got IDP content covered. Mason's doing a good job on IDP streamers, so that's a new thing. We'd love to get involved with some more Dynasty. Stocks and I are very limited with the time that we put into it, especially mid-season with rankings. Stocks does a ton of editing on all the articles that go on the site. I write a ton of content and a ton of rankings and podcasts and statistical analysis as well. So we're at almost full capacity. That's why we've not had many guests this year, because of the amount of time we're doing to get the content to you that's going to help you win. It's not that we can't get people on. We've got a lot of people that want to come on, and we'll definitely get them going when I think probably when lockdown helps and cuts down a bit and we're not at home all the time would be helpful. But there's a lot more coming, but there also is room for all of you. So if anyone wants to write for the site, if anyone wants to do a podcast, we're looking for people. You're not just automatically going to walk in the door and do a podcast next week. You got to stick with us for a period of time. Nick's been writing for us for close to a year now. Pitsy, Rob, similar sorts of time. Pitsy over a year now. Rob probably just under a year. These guys have really sort of bought their time and put the work in and shown their commitment. But it also shows that we do give opportunities to people. Ash the same, Tom the same. All these guys were all people that wrote for us, and they now all have pods, and you could too. So if you ever wanted to get into it, but rather than starting your own, don't know where to start, you can join our network. It's going to be growing bigger and better, and we just want people that have got the passion for it.
100%, and you don't have to have strong beard game like Murf and I. I mean, that's just you can just see us right now, but some of the other guys, they don't have beards.
Yours has really come on. I mean, like, yours has really got strong in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, so my sister got married. Spoiler alert, if no one knows that, it's no longer a secret. My sister got married at the beginning of October. So to Nick, who used to be on the podcast, and I decided that they are having their party exactly a year to the date next October. So I thought what I'd try and do is go full Viking up until their wedding next year, because there's nothing else in between now and then. So yeah,
no way you do it.
Well, no, I mean the wife will probably kill me. But watch
There's
this.
No way you make it. No way. I don't even think you make January 1.
Oh, well, there's a wager.
I'll tell you what. Yeah, I'll tell you what. I'll do this now on recording, right? If you make it to January 1 without shaving your beard at all, I'll donate 20 quid to the charity of your choice.
Oh, sold. Absolutely. So somebody tweet my missus. Tell her right now there's a bet gone down. She's charitable.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I'll donate 20 quid to the charity of your choice if you do not shave a single hair. Nose hair's all right. You can trim that.
Well, can I do my neck? I don't want a neck beard.
Oh, come on. That's go on then. It's for charity.
Because I wear snoods and stuff at work and they itch and okay, right. Next a good one. Right, let's do some actual NFL football fantasy talk, Murph. Let's talk some news. And 5 of the Steelers are on the COVID list as of this afternoon. Big Ben, Vince Williams, Jalen Samuels, Gerald Hawkins are the Steelers who have landed on the list and will be isolated for 5 days. 5 days seems like a random time. Each will have to pass COVID-19 tests throughout the week before potentially being eligible to play in Sunday's game against the Bengals.
I think the 5 days is to do with one for retesting to see if it's a false positive, but then also that's just the American timeline is if you show symptoms, you isolate for 5 days. And then if you have a negative test at the end of those 5 days, then you're clear. That's kind of, here we have 7 days, or if you're with other people, it's 10 or 14 days. So it's 5, 7, it's a couple of days here or there, but you're still required to have multiple negative tests
right
prior to coming back. So like what happened with Matt Stafford last week, he had a positive COVID test. This is quite interesting. So he had a positive COVID test. And don't forget, he tested positive earlier in the season. It turned out to be a false positive. I think you and I joked about this when we saw each other, and I was like, what happens if it's a false positive? And then he ended up isolating. Then he had a negative test on the Friday. He took a private plane to where they were playing at the weekend. So he completely isolated. He stayed in a different wing of the hotel, like completely by himself, completely isolated away from everyone. Got a negative test on the Saturday and then got a negative test on the Sunday morning that cleared him to play.
That's intense, isn't it? Because if he'd have got a positive Sunday, then it would have all been for nothing. But I guess...
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, that's the good thing is with some players, you don't know if it's a false positive. With Matt Stafford, given the time frame, you'd lean towards him probably having another false positive there. And he's had multiple tests since to show he doesn't have it. And with these guys, that's always so the reason why there's so many false positives is testing is only about 70% accurate. So if you think the amount of players that get tested, there are multiple false positives every week. It's a statistical likelihood that there'll be multiple false positives. So when you get a false positive, we saw this on Hard Knocks with one of the coaches, one of the Ryan sons had for the Chargers had a false positive, and he came back to work. So it is possible that out of these 5, there's at least one, maybe more, that have a false positive. So who knows? So that's why don't be alarmed just yet. Don't panic. Make the roster moves you need to make. Really, the only one here that has any kind of relevance for most fantasy leagues is Big Ben. And if you have him, you can pick up a Tua or someone like that off the waiver wire as cover. Should definitely do that anyway. But don't be surprised if Ben plays Sunday. He might not. I'm not. We don't know, but it wouldn't be out of the realms of possibility for Ben to turn up and play Sunday.
Yeah, he's on Stafford time. We should call it from now on. That sort of the window of Stafford opportunity.
So it's funny because Matt Stafford has beaten COVID tests as many times as he's beaten opposition this season.
Oh, that's just a low blow. That's such a low blow. We apologise, Matt. We know you're listening. But yeah, we did talk about picking up a second quarterback anyway, didn't we, last week or the week before, perhaps?
Well, a lot of people are. So a lot of the waiver wire is very thin. So I look at the ESPN ownership numbers, and there's just not many options out there of players I really want to own. This week it was Tua and Drew Lock, but Drew Lock is coming back off 200-300-yard games, and with the injuries that he seems to be fully healthy, maybe that's a trend that can continue. And then, but I'm looking at Drew Lock versus Joe Flacco, Kirk Cousins. There's not many more. Garrett Gilbert. I think that's about it.
Yeah.
There's those bottom end quarterbacks, Sam Darnold. Those bottom end quarterbacks that really just hurt you as opposed to really help you on a week by week basis.
100%. Falcons' former first round defensive end Tack McKinley has been waived by the Falcons. This comes after him tweeting that annihilated his value pretty much. He said he wanted to be traded last year, I think, for a second, and then he asked again to be traded this year for a 5th and a 6th, or a 6th and a 7th, and then they've just decided to waive him.
Yeah, I mean, he basically called the organization clowns. He also put, as you said, he tanked his own value. I think we talked about it on here, that he was that desperate to go. It's an interesting one. The Falcons need to eat whatever cap. They couldn't take him going into next year. I don't know why. If you're going to waive him, I don't know why you've not accepted an offer that's coming for him, even a 5th and a 6th or whatever the offer was. It's better than what you've got now, which is his salary. You're going to have to pay up. So you've eaten the salary anyway, and you've got nothing in return. So it's really bad management. I know they don't have a GM right now, but you just have to look at that scenario and think somebody has to take control, and someone should have just taken anything for him. Even a conditional 2022 7th round pick, you're not paying the salary. You're trading the salary off. So even if you're getting literally nothing in return, it's still better to trade him than to cut him. Yeah,
it's that same bad management that made them take Travis Etienne at 6 in the mock draft we just did with the 5-yard college boys. So if you haven't heard that, Rush Nation, go and check that out, because I
can hear Josh. I'm sorry, I can hear Jack Duffin going absolutely mental at that pick, because he is just like, you cannot take a running back in the first round.
Oh, I'm completely on board. But then I looked at the team needs and thought, quarterback now, not really, nothing here. Running back, yeah, right, let's go with that, because it's a mock draft and it'll be fun. So, yeah.
Fair enough.
It was enjoyable. Cowboys EVP Stephen Jones has said Andy Dalton to resume starting role when cleared. Meh.
There is another piece of interesting news that came out about an hour ago that Jerry Jones has said Dak is our quarterback. So they will not take a quarterback in the first round of the draft. They've ruled that out. No, I genuinely believe. I couldn't
tell whether you were being tombstone sarcasm there or not.
No. They genuinely, Jerry Jones, and I believe him, has said he's not going to go QB. I genuinely feel they will do a deal. I said it on here before. They can't do a deal now. If anyone's wondering why don't they just sign him, the league rules state that they cannot negotiate with him until the league year starts next year. So they cannot do a deal with him until that period happens. So they can do all the paperwork effectively and all the negotiations, and I'm sure they're probably pretty close on a few things. So I think that says that Dak will be a Cowboy next year.
And for the foreseeable, no doubt.
Yeah, absolutely.
Browns designate running back Nick Chubb to return from injured reserve. This is going to hurt Kareem Hunt's value somewhat.
Kareem Hunt has been disappointing.
I think Kareem Hunt's been better when Nick Chubb has been on the field.
Yeah, I almost lean to agree with that. I think that teams have been able to manage Kareem Hunt a little bit. Listen, when I say disappointing, he's still been a solid RB2 over the time that Chubb has been out. So when I'm saying he's disappointing, he's still playable. Like, he's still more than playable. He's still a top 18 running back in the league. But when Chubb went down, you looked at Hunt and you thought, that's a top 6 running back now. Like, that's a top 6 running back. And he has not delivered those numbers. Whereas I still think he carries top 18 to top. I don't think he's going down too much from where he is now. He'll be a top 24 running back every week. But now you've got Chubb to come in and really sort of make advantages for Cleveland as they push towards the playoffs.
Yeah, 100%. So the Pats win on Monday Night Football with a buzzer beater field goal, 30-27. I have not seen a single highlight from this game yet. Do I need to?
It's an interesting watch. It's basically two teams that just aren't very good, and seeing how they try and combat not being very good. The Patriots just shoved the ball down the throats of the Jets, and they just ran and ran and ran. Cam can't pass the football. He just can't. I sent a tweet out this morning that only one. They've thrown one touchdown in 5.5 games, and that was not Cam. That was Jared Stidham to N'Keal Harry. It's the only passing touchdown they have in 5.5 games. It's also the only wide receiver to catch a touchdown this season, which is pretty dismal. I can't remember the last time I've seen a team play 8 games and wide receivers are combined for 1 touchdown. I mean, even the Jets aren't that bad. So you've got them running the ball. The Patriots, they ran it pretty effectively. Damian Harris went down. The Jets, listen, Adam Gase, as I said, is the perfect person to get a team to win the Trevor Lawrence sweepstakes. And that's why they can't fire him, because he does things that allows them to continue to lose. And they did this because rather than on the final series of the game, and really all they're trying to do is just run the clock out to effectively try and minimize the chances of the Patriots winning. With good game management there, what you would probably be doing is running the ball, taking the time off the clock. Instead, what Joe Flacco decided to do was pass the ball. So, all right, it was completed, got 8 yards. Then he was sacked, which, okay, still takes time off the clock. I mean, it's kind of better than throwing the ball incomplete, but not enough. And then on 3rd and 7, they passed the ball and it was incomplete. Whereas, there's a minute left on the clock. There was no timeouts, I don't think, or maybe, there was they still had timeouts actually. So they might not have eaten too much, but they just, the last couple of series, they just didn't manage the game well, and they should have really won that game. But they now have a 2-game lead in the Trevor Lawrence sweepstakes. So, who's really laughing? I think if you're the Patriots, you're probably a bit upset you won that game, because as much as it would be bad to lose to the Jets, you have jumped to 13th in the draft order now, whereas you were a top 10 pick. For the Jets, you're probably quite glad with the result, because even what's the difference between 1-8 and 0-9? I mean, really, realistically, there isn't anything. So, you got a 2-game lead now in the Trevor Lawrence sweepstakes. You know that both the Giants and Washington are trying to win games because they're new coaches in their first year. You would back both of them to win at least another game this season, if not 2. So realistically, Adam Gase has got a nice 2-game window now, where as long as he doesn't win more than 2 games, he should have the number 1 pick. He probably knows he's getting fired at the end of the season. So why not just continue the job, take your paycheck, get the 1 pick and get sacked?
Yeah, this could start a new trend for people wanting to tank by hiring Adam Gaze as the guy to get them to that number one spot, and then see you can just bounce around to teams that need a year or two to tank, and then make a crust, getting them the number one overall pick.
I mean, he's the new Hugh Jackson. That is effectively what he is. He's just someone who there's no doubt that he's a good coach. And I mean that seriously. There's no doubt. I'm not saying head coach, but he's a good coach. You don't get to be a head coach in the NFL and be bad, like a bad coach, as in like coaching the fundamentals of the game. I've got no doubt he probably works quite well with quarterbacks, and he probably does a few things. But this job is too big for him. It's probably too big for a lot of people. And what this is showing is that just because you have one good skill set, it's not enough now. In modern day NFL, you need to be able to be a good people leader. You have to be able to win over the players in the dressing room, and you need to get the performances out of them. Hugh Jackson didn't do it. Dirk Cutter of the Buccaneers didn't do it. There's some coaches in the NFL now I'm not convinced do it. Anthony Lynn is right at the top of my list. I'm just not convinced that he is a good people manager. He looks good and he talks the talk, but they consistently lose year after year.
Yeah, Vance Joseph didn't do it at the Broncos, and he was head
Vance
coach.
Joseph didn't do it. Again, great coordinator, by the way, Vance Joseph. Great coordinator. And there's a whole slew of them that are great coordinators, great football people you would hire to do a part of a job, an offensive coordinator, a liner coach, or a skill position coach, or whatever it is. But these people, to be a head coach, you have to manage the whole operation. And that takes a very different skill set. And for me, Adam Gase has never demonstrated he can do that. He just never has. He's always isolated players. And I think once you start doing that, and you can see with like the Jamal Adams thing, when you've got someone like that who's so adamant to leave, and the same thing, Doug Marrone in Jacksonville is exactly the same. When you've got players willing to take pay cuts to leave, that's when you know you've got a bad culture.
And as we've seen with teams, well, not teams, but the Patriots who build a good culture. All right, this year's different because they've lost key pieces through COVID and Brady leaving, obviously. But the culture that Belichick has instilled throughout the years at the Patriots has meant that they've gone on to win Super Bowls and stuff. And culture is the key component. You don't want it to be the key opponent because then you're in trouble. The key component, I think, to building a winning team regardless of what you're doing, whether it be work, football, even if it's just your five-a-side team down the park or your actual job, if you don't have a good culture, then you're in trouble.
And it takes time to build that culture, and you need to bring in personalities that match the culture you're trying to build. And I keep going back to Tampa because it's the team I know the best, and I've said this time and time again. If Tom Brady doesn't win a Super Bowl, that doesn't make him a failure for what the Buccaneers are trying to do. They have brought in serial winners to instill a culture for future years. And they're setting a standard. And all right, Sunday they didn't do this, right? They got whooped. Missing out on a game, it happens, right? Everything goes wrong. Get a couple of bad calls, a couple of bad plays, you throw an interception, you put your defense under pressure before you know it, you snowball and you're out of the game. Happens. It's when it happens consistently over a season. That's the difference. And when you're bringing in players that are serial winners, they will elevate those around you. And that's one way of building a culture. Belichick doesn't have to do that because Belichick has that immediate respect. He's got 6 Super Bowl rings. He knows and he understands the game better than anybody. And he goes out there and drills fundamentals. There's different ways to skin the cat here, but ultimately you have to have the gravitas. The person who's leading the team has to have that gravitas and that pull to make everybody accountable. And you've got to build a performance culture. Adam Gase isn't doing it because he's never done it. There's several coaches in the NFL right now. Doug Marrone, there's a load of coaches out there that just do not do this. And that's why you see people like John Gruden. He's getting results. Do I think John Gruden wins the Super Bowl with Vegas? Probably not. But they were a bit of a laughing stock. They were a bit of a joke. You can see the progress year after year after year. They are moving in the right direction. They're pieces away. They still don't have all the components they need. But he builds that culture and he will get them to a playoff berth within the next year or two. He'll get them further than where they've been in years.
And the last couple of weeks they've shown it. You know, beating Cleveland 2 weeks ago, and then they beat the Chargers this weekend, right?
Yeah, and they they've beaten the Chiefs this year. You know, they've really been a good team this year for the most part. They're inconsistent at times. They were very bad against the Buccaneers, but that happens. You know, when you're on that journey, you're going to have off weeks. You're going to have periods where you don't perform. That happens. But for the most part, you look at the Raiders 2020 and you say, they're a better team than they were 2 years ago. And they're a better team than they were last year.
Oh, 100%.
And not a lot has changed between 2019 2020. A few draft picks, a few new personnel, but not a great. You look at that. All right, they added some offensive weapons and wide receivers in the draft, but they haven't changed. And those guys aren't even really making the plays. It's the Hunter Renfros. It's the Darren Wallers. It's Josh Jacobs. It's Derek Carr. All those guys have elevated their play.
Yeah. Considering the talk in the offseason was Derek Carr's bought a house next to Gruden and he's not even going to be the quarterback for the Las Vegas Raiders. And Derek Carr has looked head and shoulders better this year than he did last year. I mean, a couple of deep passes Sunday were just phenomenal, considering Derek Carr's yards per attempt have been pretty much league lowest.
Derek Carr is always the whipping boy, right? Because he's not flashy. He doesn't ever really turn up on a highlight reel. He doesn't ever do much that makes you look at him and go, wow, I want to be like that guy. But model professional. I thought the way he handled the Antonio Brown saga was excellent, because he waved that line between trusting his wide receiver and backing him, but also backing the team. Very difficult line to cross. I think he did it well. I think he shows good leadership qualities. He takes accountability, puts the team on his shoulders. He does what he has to do. He's always got a high completion rate, always around about 70%. He doesn't really make that many mistakes. He just doesn't have the highlight reel that a Patrick Mahomes has. And that's his knock, is he dink and dunks. But if you look at him this season, he has thrown some pretty balls. He has looked good this season. He's definitely, for me, I would say that Derek Carr, for me, is the new Dalton line. So he is that quarterback that everyone behind him is someone that I probably think needs work. And I think Derek Carr, and that's not a slight on Derek Carr at all. I think he is the sort of the medium of, he's that level of play that you need to be successful in the NFL. And everyone below him is not that.
Interesting.
Just like Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton, it was exactly the same. You looked at Andy Dalton in Cincy, and you looked at him and you went, very competent quarterback, did his job every week, without fail. Yes, does he have a few things he needs to work on? Yes. But ultimately, if you started Andy Dalton in your team, you weren't losing that often because of him. He was that line between competent and not competent.
Yeah, it's fair. I was just trying to think of quarterbacks that I'd put ahead of Derek Carr, but then when you're trying to think of all 32 quarterbacks off the top of your head real quickly, it becomes a real puzzle that you don't want to get involved with.
I'll give you the two that, for me, are below the line that could move north of the line. One is Tua, purely just down the amount of games he's played. There's no slight on him. I think he's done very well in the games he's played. He's played 2 games in the NFL. So I'm not going to say he's better than Derek Carr right now, because that's an insult to Derek Carr. The other one is Sam Darnold. At the moment, I think he's south of the line. Does he have the minerals to pull it out? Maybe, but he's probably going to have to go somewhere else to prove it. Drew Lock's another one. Drew Lock's another one I think is below that line, but he could join him.
Yeah,
I don't think he's there yet.
I think Drew Lock is currently below the line, but then same with Sam Darnold and Drew Lock. We've never technically seen them with what their availability of weapons is to provide to prove to us. I mean,
Drew
maybe
Lock, yes, I think Sam Darnold,
maybe not.
He's had nearly 40 games in the NFL.
I mean, he's still 12 though, isn't he? Isn't he like really?
That's fair.
But yeah, talking of quarterbacks, Washington quarterback Kyle Allen is to undergo season-ending surgery. Alex Smith is to be the starter. I don't know about this whole Alex Smith as the starter thing. You've got Dwayne Haskins still. I know they don't want to play him. Something's happened there with them and Dwayne Haskins for him to be completely eradicated from the quarterback situation. And Alex Smith in his first start, he probably should never have played football again. But I just don't know if Alex Smith is the guy to start for the Washington football team.
I think what that is telling you is that the coaching staff do not want Dwayne Haskins on the roster because it's not. It's the fact that he's not developed. He's not developed at all. It's attitude. It's everything. It's attitude, application, and leadership. Doesn't have any of that. And that's harsh, but that's what we're seeing. It's harsh that a 22, 23-year-old has to have all of that on his shoulder, but that is the job. Unfortunately, yes, there's a learning curve. But if Ron Rivera, and we're talking about a very well-respected NFL coach, and in his time, I've never known him to not give players a chance. He gave Haskins a chance. He didn't do the job. There was a big question mark on Dwayne Haskins as a grade. He'd had one season where he played at Ohio State. Was he ever going to be good enough? I always thought, I thought at 15 he was worth the risk to Washington because what else did they have? They didn't have a quarterback. They needed to take someone. He was worth the risk. Yes, it's not going to pan out, but you understand the thought process as to why they took him and why no one else did, because no one else was that desperate. Because the only other QBs that went ahead of him were, I think it was just Daniel Jones, wasn't it? Who went at 6 to the Giants. Yeah.
No, didn't Kyler go number 1?
Kyler went 1. You're right. So Kyler went 1, which was a bit of a shock. Jones, we knew was going to go to the Giants. They took him at 6,
which was a shock.
It was,
even though we knew
even though we knew he was going to go there at 17. He thought that was their guy. They made the move. By the way, just to let you know that in terms of Daniel Jones, he's 4-0 versus Washington now.
Good.
And he's only won one game against the other 30 teams in the NFL. And that was against Tampa last season.
Well, there's a good bit of streaming advice. If Daniel Jones is playing the Washington football team, start him in your fantasy teams because he's going to get a dub.
Yeah, that's it. So there's one. I think, I think you have to start Alex Smith because he's not your future. He's not your long term, but he's a caretaker. And ultimately, when there clearly are players on the field that don't trust Dwayne Haskins. That's the bottom line. So you play Smith, you see what you got in him. And do you keep him around next year? Who knows? But that injury to Kyle Allen, when I watched it, that was about one of the most gruesome things I've seen. Turns out it's not as bad as it looked. It's still a season ender, but he'll be well ready before the season. I thought we were looking at broken leg, broken ankle, MCL, ACL. The ankle's going completely the wrong way.
Stop it. I don't need to know any leg injury in detail.
No, I know. But yeah, so anyway, I think you have to start Alex Smith. And, what this does mean in fantasy football, as I said on Monday, you have to go out and buy JD McKissic everywhere. You just have to, because the guy's going to get 8 to 10 targets a game. Because that's what Alex Smith does. Just nice, check down. JD McKissic's going to get all that. He's a PPR monster. He's like the Jamison Crowder of the running back position. He's not going to do a lot, but he's just going to catch every ball going.
Okay. I need to go and grab him everywhere then. Good segue again, positional wise. Murf, Panthers running back Christian McCaffrey's status is in doubt after suffering a shoulder injury at the weekend. So that one game you got him back, he went out and scored about 3 gajillion fantasy points and then might not play again this week.
Yeah, it looks like this week. I mean, to be honest, he's playing Tampa, so he's always narrowed down anyway, given how they stopped the run. But
he is Christian McCaffrey.
He is Christian McCaffrey, but he doesn't get those bazillion yards that he does against other teams. It's a week to week. Ultimately, you just have to see and wait what happens. I hope you didn't drop Mike Davis, because if you did,
Did I give you Mike Davis in the Vampire League? I think I did.
Yeah, you might have done.
I think I did, because Christian McCaffrey was back. Oh, by the way, Vampire League. Did you see my move I put on Neo Elliott this week?
No.
Oh, I was winning by 0.6. No one else to play except Michael Thomas. So I moved to Michael Thomas because I control the waivers. Moved Michael Thomas to my bench and added the Jets' 7th string wide receiver who was never going to play a snap in the NFL, and then swapped him for DJ Moore. So you're welcome.
Oh, that's cruel.
Yeah, I mean, it's just all about maximum pain in this Vampire League for me. I'm enjoying it.
Yeah. Good.
I'm enjoying it. And then finally, Anthony Lynn on the Chargers' latest loss. At some point, good things will happen.
Do you know when they'll happen?
So at some point.
When Anthony Lynn gets fired.
Oh. I thought maybe he's alluding.
Maybe he's alluding to his own sacking.
Oh dear.
Listen, I like Anthony Lynn. Nice guy. Saw him on Hard Knocks. Thought, good bloke. Really good bloke. I'd go and have a beer with him. Lovely bloke. He seems like a really nice bloke. Knowledgeable bloke. You don't survive as long as he has in the NFL. He was an undrafted running back. You don't do the things he's done in the NFL without being good. But he's not good enough to be a head coach, because you do not lose the amount of games that they lose every single week unless something is wrong. And they don't have a bad team. You look on paper, their defense is terrible, and they've got Joey Bosa, they got Melvin Ingram, they've got who's the cornerback? Chris Harris.
Oh, and Casey.
They got so many good players. They got Justin Herbert, who looks the real deal.
We're missing a safety and a linebacker as well. Kenneth Murray's one of them. And
they've got a ton of players. And can't win football games. It's the coach. Could have told you this last year. Could have told you this the year before, even the year before that. But you have the fundamentals of a good team there. There's some really good ball players there, and they're not winning games. It's the coach.
So last season you were going after the Giants GM job. Are you now sort of switching towards the Colts head coach?
Chargers,
sorry.
No, because I think the GM's done a good job. The GM has to put the team together. And you look at that roster is better than their record. That's a playoff roster for me. Tough division. You can argue that they could win 9-10 games and not get in. I'd accept that. I don't think it's Tom Telesco's fault. I think he's built a good roster.
So maybe you should go and be the head coach then, Murf. Go and.
That would be insulting to so many people if that happened. I think that they have a lot of good things, and I don't think it would take a lot for a good winning coach to go in there and flip them into a playoff or a playoff contending team.
Yeah, agree. And then finally,
as a Chargers fan, you've got to be upset. You've got to be upset as a Chargers fan.
Yeah,
because you look at the talent, you get the hope every year. You seem to get better every year. They don't have a major deficiency. They've got a decent run game. All right, the offensive line, it's probably the biggest area they could improve on. But they've got great D everywhere. Got ball players all over. Got a great quarterback now. Got good offensive weapons. Fix the O-line, you'll probably be a bit better. That's it.
And then a bit of breaking news. I'm going to say breaking. It broke as we started. T.Y. Hilton says he's pretty much a full. I'll read it to you. It says, if my phone lights up, great stuff. T.Y. Hilton says he's very close to a return after being a full participant in the walkthrough. So that doesn't really mean anything for fantasy right now, because T.Y. Hilton's almost bench droppable from the bench because you're not starting him, because he's been pretty terrible. But
yeah, he's not been good enough.
He's not been good enough.
I said you can drop him in leagues, and I still think that's the case.
Right, it's time for the main segment, and for once, I've had a go at it, and I'm pretty excited about this. It's a little quiz about fantasy trade value, and now because we've talked about it over the last couple of weeks, excuse me, how people are valuing players at their ADP value rather than their current performance, and how, like Murf talked about, flipping players who necessarily you wouldn't think were the same value, but actually were overperforming the guy that was being offered. So I can't remember the example you gave last week, Murf, who you got rid of, but there's players that are playing better than players who were drafted higher, and yet people are unwilling to trade for them or trade them because of name value. So we're going to start with a little Who Am I quiz just to get you fired up, Murf. Listeners, if you want to play along at home, you can play along at home. I don't have an option for you to chime in. I mean, there's probably a comment section somewhere. So the first one is Who Am I? And so this guy, Murphy, is a quarterback. He has a 71% completion rate. He's throwing for 2,151 yards. That's 8.4 a attempt. He's thrown 6 interceptions to 26 touchdowns. Who is this quarterback? Would you like a clue?
I got two in my head. And both of them are in the NFC South.
That's not the clue I've got written down.
But so looking at the amount of touchdowns, I would say it'd be Brady.
Oh, incorrect.
Teddy Bridgewater? That was
Incorrect.
The other one. Okay.
They lead the league in passing touchdowns. That's the clue.
Pat Mahomes.
Nope. Russell Wilson.
Oh, okay.
With 26.
I thought he'd throw more interceptions than that.
So did I. Right. The next guy, who am I, is also a quarterback. He has a 66% completion rate for 1,847 yards, 7.3 an average, 13 touchdowns through the air, and 7 rushing touchdowns. Who am I?
Josh Allen.
Kyler Murray.
That was my next guess.
Yeah, he has the most rushing touchdowns to date. Okay, now this one is mind-boggling, and I think I've seen some correlation as to why this has happened. So this is another quarterback. He has 58% completion rate. He's thrown for 1,883 yards at 6.2 an attempt, has 12 touchdowns to 12 interceptions. Who am I?
Carson Wentz.
Correct. He's also been sacked a league-leading 32 times.
A lot.
I'm not surprised he's thrown that many interceptions if he's trying to get rid of the ball.
Well, he didn't look good in the first half of the season. But yeah, the only reason I knew that is he's only thrown like 7 or 8 interceptions in a season. 8 was his career high before this season.
Right. The next one is a little bit of fun here. And if you get this, I will donate £20 to your chosen charity on January the 1st.
Okay.
So this is, I will give you, you're not going to get, I'll tell you what, this is worst yards per attempt so far this season for a running back. Okay. He's had 1 attempt for minus 12 yards.
Have a word.
Who am I?
Right. 1 attempt for, so he's a running back. Wait, so let's clarify. He's an actual designated running back. He's not like a...
No, I've never heard of him. And the only reason I know this is a stat is because I accidentally clicked on the yards per attempt twice and he came to the top of the list.
Wow. Okay.
You don't be Googling right now.
No, I'm thinking one attempt for minus 12 yards.
Minus 12 yards for a running back. That is ridiculous.
So it would have been someone who would have got the ball behind the line of scrimmage. Oh my God.
I know.
Well, the fact they would have only got 1 attempt says it's someone I'm not really going to know all that well.
I want to see this play to know how we got minus 12 rushing yards.
I mean, I know players that have done close to that this season.
Shall I tell you who he plays for?
Yeah.
He plays for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know.
I am
the player.
Adrian Killins Jr.
Yeah, would never got that.
No, me neither. I don't even know he existed. Okay, here's a fun one. We'll move on from who am I. Who has more receptions as a running back, Derrick Henry or Todd Gurley?
That's a good question. What
do you reckon?
I reckon it's close.
It's very close.
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be a lot of difference between them. I would probably say, given that you've put this in this kind of question, I would lean Derrick Henry.
Yeah, see, I thought you might double bluff yourself. Todd Gurley leads by 3. Gurley only has 13 receptions on the season.
Yeah, I knew they were both very low. Yeah, you double bluffed me there. Nice.
Okay, who am I? I have 21 receptions off of 39 targets, 315 yards, 0 touchdowns, and I was drafted as the 33rd wide receiver off the board.
Hang on, read those stats out again.
21 receptions off 39 targets, 315 yards, 0 touchdowns, and I was the 33rd wide receiver off the board in half PPR. Yep.
No receiving touchdowns.
No receiving touchdowns.
So that rules out like N'Keal Harry.
Would you like a clue?
So before the clue, I would say Julian Edelman.
Correct. Ding, 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 ding. My clue was that he was the one on the team he plays for. Right. Are you ready for this one? I like this one.
Go on,
Who am I? I have 37 receptions off of 54 targets for 436 yards. My longest is 56 yards. I have 4 touchdowns. And I also have 16 rush attempts for 108 yards and 2 touchdowns. Who am I?
Right. Go through that again.
Good Lord. 37 receptions off 54 targets for 436 yards. My longest reception is 56 yards. I have 4 receiving touchdowns. I also have 16 rushing attempts for 108 yards and 2 touchdowns. Who am I?
So the only person I can think of at wide receiver who would get that kind of work would be someone like Curtis Samuel.
Oh, no, you're wrong. This is the only wide receiver with over 100 rushing yards is your clue, and it isn't Curtis Samuel. You can have another guess.
Not Bobby Trees.
It is Bobby Trees. That's why
because he's done a few. Yeah, because he broke off a big run. Bobby Trees.
Bobby Trees.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Now we have a couple of trade without names. So these guys have relative fantasy football points scored to this point in the season. These are the sort of things we were talking about people not doing because of trade name value. So if you are after a running back and you have a wide receiver who has scored 126 fantasy points, would you trade that wide receiver for a running back who has scored 120 fantasy points to date?
All day long. Wouldn't even hesitate.
Okay, so you would be trading DK Metcalf for James Robinson.
Done. Yeah, I'd probably do that.
And then the next one, you need a running back and you have a wide receiver again. Your wide receiver has scored 91.5 fantasy points. Your running back has scored 89.1. Would you trade the wide receiver for the running back?
Sorry, what were the points?
So the wide receiver has 91 and the running back has 89. Let's say you own the running back and are wide receiver needy. So your running back has scored 89 points and the wide receiver has 91.
I'd probably look to get a bit more if I was wide receiver needy, but then that 91, I think it's close. I think for me, given the fact that the running back is still putting up relative numbers, as long as they're not hurt or injured or anything like that, they've had their bye, I'd probably stick with the running back.
So the running back is Joe Mixon and the wide receiver is Terry McLaurin.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I'd probably, I don't think it was enough there for me to do it.
Okay, and then I've put together a list of 2 players from each position who were drafted significantly further apart than each other.
Okay.
We'll start at the quarterback position. This guy was drafted as the QB 12 off the board. He has 187 fantasy points. He has a quarterback rating of 113, 20 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. And the second,
who that is.
Oh, go on then. Tell me who.
Wow, the 2 interceptions gave it away. It's Aaron Rodgers.
It was, and they were both in the same game, as you well know.
Yeah.
And then so he was drafted as the quarterback 12. The second quarterback was the 5th quarterback off the board. He has 183 fantasy points.
Yeah, so that's Deshaun Watson, just because he said quarterback 5 off the board.
See, you're right. But it's interesting, isn't it, how he's thrown 15 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, and you had to draft him 7 quarterbacks. But that, just the quarterbacks is pretty irrelevant. When you look at their overall ADP, Deshaun Watson went 40th overall in half PPR, and Aaron Rodgers went twice the distance after him at 80 overall.
And both of them are ahead of Lamar Jackson, who's the QB 13 right now.
Exactly. It's just crazy when I was looking at this and I'm thinking these people not willing to trade because of name value and the players they're not willing to trade for when you don't dive into the information, you think this is like, what is happening here? I mean, the stuff you could be getting because you're not willing to drive is mad. So let's move on to running backs. This is the running back 34 off the board. He has 100 fantasy points. He's got 117 attempts, 22 receptions, 109 receiving yards, 4 rushing touchdowns and no touchdowns through the air. So he was the running back 34 off the board and has 100 fantasy points. The second guy was the running back 18 off the board. He has 104 fantasy points. Similar amount of attempts at 110, less receptions at 18. He has 5 touchdowns on the ground and none through the air.
So I reckon I know the first one.
Go on then. You should know the first one.
So, yeah, the fact that you said that, it's Ronald Jones.
Yeah, and that's not because you're a Buccaneer, but because of where he was drafted at ADP 34.
Part of that was ADP. Part of that was I just know his stat lines reasonably well. The other one's interesting. So I'm trying to think of players who were drafted that high who have been disappointing, and I've got it to between 2.
I should have put the overall here. I'm sorry. I didn't have them in for running back or wide receiver, but
That's
carry
all
on.
right. So the 2 running backs I would say in that ADP range you mentioned would be David Montgomery, but he might have been slightly later, and the other one is James Conner.
Correct, James Conner. Should have said no at David Montgomery, but I was kind and let you have 2 guesses.
Okay, thanks.
I don't actually know where David Montgomery went off the top of my head, but I think points-wise, I did it
similar.
I did it on relative points at the moment scored, which is why the points are similar in the. Now this next one is the points are very different, and I did this because of now one of them's missed a few games, but of where they were drafted. So the first wide receiver was drafted as the 7th wide receiver off the board, has 102 fantasy points, 30 receptions or 46 targets, 373 yards and 7 touchdowns.
Okay, I know who that is.
Yeah, I realize now after I've done this, I've put way too many Buccaneers in here.
And that's then, Mike Evans, the 7 touchdowns was the giveaway.
It is. And then the next wide receiver was the 27th wide receiver off the board. He has 54 receptions off 79 targets, 695 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Interestingly, their longest is within a yard of each other. One's Mike Evans has 50, and the other guy has 49, and the yards per reception are both 12. So, who is the second wide receiver I mentioned?
What were the stats again?
He was 27th over wide receiver off the board.
Okay.
54 receptions, 79 targets. He's 695 yards and 3 touchdowns. I haven't got any clues for this, but I can give you one if you need it.
I have 2 in my mind who I think this is. I don't know where they were taken off the board. You said there was a big gap off the board.
Yes.
As in more than 3 rounds?
Don't have the overall, but considering he was 20 wide receivers later than Mike Evans, I imagine it was.
Okay. So my initial thought was DJ Moore, but I get the feeling that's not quite right. So the only other person I can think that sort of range of stats.
If you get this right.
CD Lamb?
No, it's not CD Lamb. Did you see CD Lamb's toe tap catch on the sideline that weekend?
Oh, superb.
Oh,
really
unbelievable. It was Stephon Diggs.
Wow, okay. I wouldn't have got that.
Yeah, and he is currently the wide receiver 5, I think.
Yeah, he's had a good season.
Yeah, wide receiver 6. I couldn't believe it. When I was looking down the list, I was thinking, who do I compare him to? Because obviously points-wise, Stephon Diggs has 114. Then Devontae Adams is under him with 113, but you can't really use him because he's missed so many games. And then DeAndre Hopkins is just above him. I could have used him, but one of the things I found interesting on this as well is the ownership percentages on Fantasy Pros. They give you ownership percentages of the players.
Yeah.
Players like, for instance, Robert Woods is only 95% owned. So 5% of fantasy leagues out there, Robert Woods isn't owned.
Those sorts of leagues will be like heavily customized leagues.
Without Rams? Is that?
No, it'd probably be things like could be heavily IDP with just like one player per position, something like that. You get this tolerance of about 4 or 5% leagues. Are just, we do wacky leagues, right? But we tend to do wacky leagues with loads of players. You can get wacky leagues with like no players, like touchdown only leagues and things like that. So that could be a a thing. You also get leagues that don't add like new players. That's why someone like Lamar Jackson is like 99% owned, not 100% owned, because you have leagues that sort of get to a point and they say, right, we're not adding any new players until like all these players retire. So there's a shrinking pool.
Good Lord.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's why that's why you get that variance. I don't think I've ever seen a player 100% owned for those reasons. I could be wrong.
There's three on this list: Tyreek Hill, DeAndre Hopkins, and Devontae Adams.
Okay, but 3 out of how many NFL players?
Yeah, exactly. That list it goes down, and there's not. I can't see another one for ages. Oh, there we go. Julio Jones, but they're all apart from CR. Yeah, that's it.
They're all reasonably older players.
Interesting point. And then finally, Murf, as we clock down towards the end of the show, let's do some tight ends. This one I found very interesting. The first one was the tight end 13 off the board, has 30 receptions of 46 targets, 349 yards, and 3 touchdowns. And the second tight end was the tight end 20 off the board. He had 22 receptions, 35 targets, 272 yards, but 5 TDs. I didn't tell you their fantasy points. Would you like to know them?
Yeah, sure.
First one is 67.9 and the second one is 68.2. So they're basically the same guy.
67.9 and 68.2.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Tight end 13, tight end 20.
20.
So tight end 13, around that realm, around with those sorts of numbers. The two in my head are Noah Fant or Jared Cook.
No, sir. See, this could be a trick question. It's not a trick question. I didn't put it in as a trick question, but it's Hayden Hurst. Now, I feel like at the end of the season, he was a lot higher on the tight ends.
Yeah, he was. He was going off tight end 7, tight end 8.
So I just went off Fantasy Pros data, so apologies, mate. But yeah, that was Hayden Hurst.
So the other one with the 5 TDs and not a high yardage total.
This should be much more gettable.
I think it's Robert Tonyan.
No. Have another guess.
Oh.
Do you think Robert Tonyan was drafted?
I think people towards the end of the season were definitely drafting him. I think they were definitely drafting him given the fact that it was him or Jay Sternberger. And I think towards the end of fantasy draft season, people kind of knew he was there. So the only other person who I think people were picking up at tight end 20, which I'm more shocked that there were people drafting 20 tight end, like it was 20 tight ends drafted. But the only other, so we're talking 5 TDs, right? So with low yardage total, the only other person I can think of would be Jimmy Graham.
No, it does begin with a J. It's Jonnu Smith.
He was no way the tight end 20. I'm not having that.
I'm just going off Fantasy Pros data, man.
That is absolute hogwash. He was going in the bottom. He was going around 12. I'm shocked by that. Yeah,
if later.
I didn't see him much later. A lot of people bought into the hype of Jonnu Smith. But okay.
So I thought that was I found it an interesting activity. I think activity is the wrong word there, but to go through that sort of thing, to look at players from that perspective, because then it might give you the impetus to then trade away people you are holding on to name value for, rather than going after players who are currently performing, especially if you are around 500 or needing wins to push towards 500 to get to the playoffs, because name value is not going to get you there. It's the points that will get you there. So
yeah, 100%. I think that's the key, is you have to look at the numbers they're putting up consistently. You have to look at the types of profile of player that you've got there. And I think there's some really good players that you can get that don't have that name value, that you can go and target. People like Robbie Anderson, I think, is someone that you should go and target. You've got other players, Justin Jefferson, T. Higgins, they're players that you can go and target. For me right now, if I could shift Juju Smith-Schuster in season long for Justin Jefferson, I'm snapping it. I'm all day long. I am snapping that and getting it done. I just think that's not even close. One is a designated 2 with high volume. The other one is, in a 3 and is never going to be the
It's never going to
Top
be the
two.
alpha. Never ever. Well, that I found it interesting, Murf, and I hope you did too, Rush Nation. And Murf, it was maybe a little bit of a rest for you from coming up with the whole show doc. So
Yeah, I said to you yesterday that I was having a real struggle with the creativity of what this show could be for this week. I was just sort of struggling, so I appreciate that a lot.
well, as long as it didn't bore the socks off you, but hey,
It definitely didn't.
you can have the reins back next week. Rush Nation, that is all for the Tuesday flagship. Don't forget to check out 5 Yard College on a Wednesday. Don't forget to check out the DFS boys on a Thursday. Don't forget to check out the Fast Action Friday, well, on the Friday. And then don't forget to check out Murf for this matchup pod later on in the week.
Yeah,
Big man.
Start sits out tomorrow as well. So definitely get tuned into that. And do you know what would be really good, Rush Nation? There's two things that would be really good. One, write us a review, please. We're getting so close to 100 reviews. They kind of dried up a little bit. Just please, if you've got the time, borrow your wife's phone if you've written this one before. Anything you can do to write us a review on iTunes or Apple Podcasts, whatever they're called, right? That would really mean the world. You know, we're going to do some more cool stuff on Patreon, but you know what? I understand it's a tough time, tough economy. If you can't join the Patreon, then you can't donate, and I understand 100%. Write us a review, please. Just anything like that is really, really helpful. But yeah, the second is if you have any content that you are really seeking. So if there's something you think, actually, do you know, this would make my reading, my research better. There's more things I kind of want. Pitch us, just let us know what it is, even if you don't feel comfortable writing it, and we'll see what we can do. And if we think there's value to it, then we will do it. We're churning out so much content at the moment. The website is literally bursting at the seams with the amount of traffic it gets at the moment, which is great. You know, we set a target, or I set a target for website visits by the Super Bowl, and I think we're about there. I don't think we're far off. So keep reading and consuming the content, but also anything you want to see on there, let us know. We'll let you know if we can do it.
100%. Right, big man, I'll let you get off. Enjoy your evening. Rush Nation, this has been an absolute pleasure. Video watchers, we salute you for watching us, not in the studio right now. One day when this COVID business is over, we will be back. Those hallowed walls will be graced once more. We might have to get the dusters out and dust a little bit here and there, because I imagine a few 8-legged friends have moved in. But hey, the important stuff's right here with us. You got me, you got Murf, you got the team. This has been an absolute blast, man. Tuesday's best day of the week, Rush Nation. You stay safe in these lockdown times. If you're in the UK, elsewhere, just stay safe. And we'll see you, we'll see us tomorrow, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, all week long. Rush Nation, as always, don't forget, keep rushing.